What's going on, everybody? It's your friendly local neighborhood Mason back here again, and I'm pretty sure you're wondering what I'm doing here. This is a game that I've never played on the channel before. For some of you, you might know what this is. This is Train Simulator 2017. And the reason I'm here will become evident rather quickly, especially for some of you who are in the railfan area of YouTube, especially the Steam rail fans. So, over the last week or so, I've run into some videos about a certain someone. And I decided after seeing these videos, I'd throw my hat into the ring on the discussion and give my 2 cents. If you haven't figured out who this person is already, I don't blame you because he is very vague and very kind of hidden. There aren't that many videos on him. Most of them are a couple of years old. Some aren't, though, which is what made me think, he's worth looking into. So, who is this person? Well, he's got a little something tied into our locomotive here on the head end. Good old 844. If you haven't figured it out already, we're talking about railfan 1234. Now, for those of you who are not into the railfan area on YouTube, and definitely not the Steam railfan area on YouTube, let me kind of fill you in. Railfan is kind of the... He's kind of the Minecraft troll of the Steam YouTube genre, if that makes any sense. And I know after watching some of these videos, I could just sit here and sprout off my opinion, call him an asshole a few times, which in my opinion he is. And I can do this, that, the other thing, just like everybody else who has talked about him has, and I will to some extent in my own way. But that's not exactly what I'm here to do. Because he claims that he runs a factual argument. What's his argument? He argues for the scrapping of steam locomotives. That's why I have old 844 out. He argues that it would save the planet and all this stuff about global warming and whatnot. It would save the planet if we scrap steam locomotives. Now, he claims to have a factual argument, and I've seen parts of it, but it's really, really bad facts. So, the first half of this video is going to be my factual argument towards him, and then the second half is going to be my opinion of him. So, stick around. So, railfan1234 claims that the scrapping of steam locomotives will be beneficial to the environment, which I think is complete bullshit, and most people do. But I have the facts. See, once upon a time, there were a lot of steam locomotives around the world. It was the original transport system. If you wanted to go by rail, you went by a steam locomotive. There were no diesels around way back when, and I'm sure at least a good majority of you who are watching this know that. Unfortunately, due to people's greed and the ever-rising want for more metal, steam locomotives have largely been scrapped because they are very valuable because they are a large chunk of metal, and metal is always going to be needed in our society. So there are a lot less steam locomotives around than there used to be. And he advocates for the destruction of the rest of them. Well, I got some numbers for him right here. In 2013, Union Pacific, one of the largest, if not the largest, Class A, or Class 1, whatever you want to call it. I believe it's officially Class A. I can't remember off the top of my head, so don't quote me on that. The largest Class A railroad, or one of the, in the United States, Union Pacific, had 8,395 locomotives on their roster in 2013, 3 of which were steam locomotives. 2 of these were operational. So, out of their entire roster of 8,395, 8,392 of them were diesel locomotive power. I've looked into the numbers a little bit, and it's kind of hard to find official numbers because this is kind of hard to track. But There are about 1,800 steam locomotives left in the United States, back from when there used to be 160,000. There are 1,800 roughly in the United States, with a very small fraction in operational condition. It's, railroads don't really like having steam locomotives run on them because it disrupts their normal service, and they're all about money. Oh, speaking of diesels and whatnot, here's a CXX freight train. Very short one to have 2 units on it, but I digress. I got 18 miles left to work with a speed limit of 45. Oh well. Now, there in the United Kingdom, there are several hundred preserved steam locomotives, with a decent number of them in operational condition. And the rest of the world doesn't really have that very good readings because, like I said, this is stuff that's very hard to track. So I'm going to make some generalizations here. By my guess, there are maybe, and this could be a very low guess, this could be a very high guess. I'm guessing it's a very high guess considering how valuable the metal from steam locomotives can be. I'm guessing there are, at max, in my opinion, only roughly 6,000 steam locomotives left at all around the world. Not in operational condition, just at all. Now, when you factor in operational condition, there's probably less than 2,000. Probably. These are just generalizations. But the point I'm trying to make here is there are probably less steam locomotives left in the entire world than the number of diesel locomotives on a single Class A railroad in the United States. That's not accounting for any other Class A railroads in the United States, and that's not accounting for all the railroads in the United States, and that's not accounting for all the other railroads around the world that use diesel motive power. Do you really think, Heelfan, that the destruction of even just these operational steam locomotives will delay your global warming in any sort of way as you seem to claim? I didn't think so. That's what I have in my idea for facts. Because you claim to have a factual argument, that's what I feel is a factual argument. You say that it's for the environment to scrap these locomotives. I say that's a load of bullshit because it's not going to save the environment by the scrapping of a lower number of locomotives than the number of diesels on a single Class A railroad. And you might argue that steam locomotives produce more harmful pollution. That may be true, but in such a small number compared to diesel locomotives, which produce carbon monoxide, obviously, because they're an internal combustion engine, just a diesel, compared to the number of diesels that are currently around the world, yeah, it's going to be a very, very small percentile that you accomplish in this idea that the destruction of steam locomotives will lead to the help in global warming. So that's kind of my opinion on him, my factual argument towards him, and I would actually like to see him see this video and comment towards me and tell me how wrong I am, because I want to have a conversation with this person, because I don't believe in just yelling at them and telling them they're an asshole and this, that, the other thing. I want to have a conversation with them. I want to understand why and what they feel, because I feel that's the only way you can get anything done. Now, do I completely disagree with his argument? Oh, wholeheartedly. But that doesn't mean I don't want to hear it, because then I can come up with factual retorts to disprove him and maybe get him to understand why people don't like his argument so much. Which I'm pretty sure he seems to understand that people don't like his argument, and he's just running with it. So, now that the facts are out of the way, into the opinions. In my opinion, Heelfan's just a troll. He's just a troll who saw his way to get his 5 minutes of fame on YouTube, and every time we give it to him, like I'm doing right now, he's winning. Which is probably why people haven't made that many videos about him, or maybe he's just not as... I wouldn't say popular, just not as easy to find as I might think he is, thanks to. Anyways, that my point is that from what I have seen, he's just a massive troll who's trying to get attention. And that's exactly what we're giving him. And that's exactly what he wants. So, do I see him as a threat? No. I don't think we got anything to worry about. But if he does personally have these feelings, then you can go screw yourself, buddy. Steam locomotives aren't going anywhere, and the thought that the destruction of them will save the environment is an awful one. But if you even tried to get rid of all the operational steam locomotives in the United States, let alone all of them entirely, there would be a large amount of backlash against you. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that many historians state that steam locomotives built the United States, that they were what built the US, because it's true. They were the ones that fully and properly connected the two coasts of the United States for the first time with a fast and easy way to travel between them. The Transcontinental Railroad. If it wasn't for that, we would have nothing. Railroads have played an important part in wars. The Civil War was won partly because of the advanced railroad network that the North had over the South. It was important because it meant fast equipment movement and fast troop movement, and that's what you need in a war. Trust me, I know. I've studied war enough. World War I and World War II. Rail networks were large targets for both sides. I should have said major, not large, but I'm saying it now. Were major targets for both sides because it could cripple the other's industry. Not just that, it could cripple their military because they needed it to get the raw materials and to get the finished products and troops to and from where they needed to be so that it could support the war effort. That's why there was such a big boom in the United States for large steam locomotive production in the 1940s because we were desperate for it. And steam locomotives have just become iconic. There are some people who personally believe that steam locomotives almost have a living, breathing soul in them because they were put together by hand and because even when they come from the same line, like these FEF3s 844 belongs to, they're all different. You're never going to find two that fire the same, drive the same, act the same. Not like diesels. Diesels basically you just push on the starter and they all act the same. Steam locomotives weren't like that. They had their own personalities to them that you had to learn. You had to understand how to drive each one. You couldn't just go from one to the other and automatically know how to make it run its best. Sure, you could get it to go stop and start, but you're not going to get it to run at its best. Mallard was able to do 126 miles per hour. Not all her sisters could do that, and definitely not in the same way she did. They would need different circumstances, and they would need different ways of driving them. Long and short of it, steam locomotives are here to stay no matter what you think. I know your buddy Cockroach he's the same way, and you both can go. Just go. Stop bothering us. And I know Cockroach, and I'm going to bring him up real quick, but I don't know that much about him. I think he claimed to have a scrap yard and has scrap steam locomotives from what I have seen and what I have found, which hasn't been very much because, again, these records aren't very well kept. And I think these might just have been locomotives that were in the preservation circuit. But from what I have found, there have only been 2 reported cases of steam locomotives being scrapped in this century. In the United States, at least. Don't put me in with the rest of the world there. I can't tell you anything about the rest of the world. But in the United States, at least, there have only been 2 reported instances of steam locomotives being scrapped since the turn of the century. Or is it turn of the millennium? Same thing. Whatever. Since 2000, all right? I'm very tired. I'm doing this at 1:30 in the morning. Steam locomotives are here to stay no matter what you think. Part because they are iconic, part because they are living, breathing history, and part because they, in a way, are the embezzlement. embodiment, not embezzlement, embodiment of the American spirit, in my opinion. Because we wouldn't have the United States that we have today if it wasn't for the railroads. They were part of the industrial boom. If it wasn't for the railroads, we wouldn't have had the same kind of industrial boom that we did. And it's the same story around the world. Railroads have been very important, and steam, for since their creation up until the 1960s, pretty much ran the rails. They're not going anywhere. Diesels haven't even been around for 100 years and haven't. Well, maybe they've been around, but they haven't been running the majority of our railroads for 100 years. Steam locomotives did. They're not going anywhere. You can say this and that, and you can be trolls and try to make people angry as much as you want, but at the end of the day, your arguments are invalid. Steam isn't going anywhere. Locomotives aren't going anywhere. And you can just stop your lying. Just stop your BSing, alright? And if you want one final example of why steam locomotives aren't going anywhere and why they have been around so long and why people love them so much, look no further than the locomotive that I'm sitting back and driving right now, 844. 844 is the only steam locomotive in the United States that belongs to a Class A railroad that has never been taken out of commission. If I remember correctly, she was the last FEF3 to be built. I think it was actually Union Pacific's last steam locomotive to be built, 844. I'm pretty sure about that. I can't remember off the top of my head. This is off of memory. But she was one of the last, if not the last steam locomotive built for the UP and for the FEF3 line. But she never exited regular service. Sure, she was put on the sidelines and regulated to yard snow clearing duty or something. They put blowers on the front for cowcatcher to blow snow out of the yard. But she has been on UP's roster ever since she was built. She's never left. She's never been taken out of service. And she's the only one that can claim that for a Class A railroad in the United States. And you want to know why they didn't take her out of service? Is because she could still do her job. That's why they didn't take her out of service. Some people believe that diesels are better than steam locomotives because they took over and steam wasn't as good, and that's why they took over. The reason that steam lost to diesels was because... Oh, ended the quick drive. This is going to boot me out in a second, so I'll make this ending real quick. I didn't realize that I'd gone 25 miles that fast, but then again, I was doing 100 miles an hour. Yep, wheels locked up. 844 could still do her job. The reason that steam lost to diesel wasn't because they couldn't do their job or they weren't big enough or powerful enough or this, that, the other thing. It was because of cost effectiveness. Diesels are more cost effective to run because they're easier to maintain, they're easier to use. But the people who put their time and effort into these steam locomotives love them. They see them as rolling pieces of art in some cases. I mean, have you seen some of these pictures that have been taken from way back in like the 20s, 30s, and 40s? I can't remember the guy's name, but he like specialized in night pictures on the Norfolk and Western. That's art. It's photographic art. And it's because these locomotives are like living beasts as they run down the rails. And that's why people love them so much, and that's why they're here to stay, because they inspire imagination. They inspire people's love for the railroad. You put a brand new SD40 or whatever the new Jeep is up against 844 or something, everybody's going to flock for the steam locomotive because it's old, because it's antique, but also because it's different. That's the thing. Steam locomotives, even back then, were loved because, one, they were just amazing machines, but two, it took... Oh, hello, Amtrak train that's going in reverse that I passed earlier. But it took skill to drive a steam locomotive. Nowadays, you just gotta know how to hit the throttle and hit the brake. And I know I'm just dumbing that down, and I can't claim to be an actual engineer, but back in the day when you had to drive a steam locomotive, it took skill. And that's something that has been lost on the railroad. This skill that needs to be there. And that's why people love these machines. They are something that nobody else has anymore. And that's why people want them. That's why people want to see them running, because they are rolling pieces of engineering artwork from a lost era where everything was badass. So go ahead. Go ahead, troll. Go ahead and say all you want to say about scrapping steam locomotives. You can go and lie to yourself all you want. They're here to stay. They're here to stay, and people like you are just going to lose the argument every single time. This has been Mason, aka Bucking Bronco 1968, signing off. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. And always remember, keep on dreaming.